It is now day 86 since Nancy Guthrie disappeared. Literally just vanished out of her home in Tucson, Arizona. Still no real explanation. Still no suspects. It's been almost 3 months. In this episode, I'm getting into some new information. And you guys remember before Nancy Guthrie disappeared, and I've reported on this before, there was this reality show that was set to tape and had already started taping with the Puma County Sheriff's Office. Well, now there are some emails that have come out through a public records request. Fox Digital actually got them. They're just interesting because they showed the behind the scenes of the sheriff's office. They also talk about the fact that there were changes in leadership positions in homicide and also in the cold case unit, which is something that I've reported a lot about. The fact that experienced leaders were moved around by the sheriff. And a lot of people are not happy about that. And there's questions about whether that may have impacted the Nancy Guthrie investigation. So I'm going to get into that in this episode. Also, this question of whether there is one or more than one suspect involved in this. Obviously, we saw the guy in the doorbell camera, but is there someone else involved? I'm going to ask retired FBI agent Steve Moore about that. And we've heard a lot of theories that go both way, but he has interesting theory based on evidence that he knows about that he's going to explain here, and a couple of other updates that I've learned about over the last couple of days that I'm going to get into in this episode of Brian Anton Investigates. Hey Steve, it's nice to see you. Thank you for joining me again. I always appreciate talking to you about the latest developments with the Nancy Guthrie investigation. And there's still I was just telling my friend, I get so many emails every day. Still even, it's been months later from people so interested in this case, and a lot of older people around NY's age even, or in their 70s, who have just really been impacted by this. And everybody wants answers, but it's just interesting. There's a whole, I think, segment of people that are really, really impacted by what happened to Nancy and are just disturbed by it. I wanted to start off asking you though, Fox Digital obtained some emails from the Pima County Sheriff's Office. They were working with A&E. There was going to be a reality show coming out where A&E was going to be following around deputies within the sheriff's office in Puma County and getting access to them going out on calls and that kind of thing. And it's interesting because in the emails they were trying to obtain certain videos and going back and forth about body camera video and asking for interviews with heads of departments. And one of the responses back to them was the department has experienced some rotational reassignments since last year. And they basically said that the head of the cold case unit and the homicide unit had moved out. So they were having some scheduling issues, which, knowing what we know now, what we learned after what happened with Nancy Guthrie, the sheriff had moved a lot of the experienced people out of the leadership roles for political reasons, from what we can tell, people who didn't support him in the election. What do you make of the fact that this was all kind of coming to light through these emails before we knew any of this was going to happen with Nancy Guthrie? Yeah, from my understanding, the filming, of course, happened before the murder investigation. But still, when you send them an email and they say, well, we've had rotational assignments that have taken these people, or rotational reassignments, you wonder why they had to specify that as to the reason. We just say, hey, they're no longer in that job. You know how it goes. Plus, I don't remember, at least in the FBI, rotational assignments. That I suppose there are a few. But when you go into a job, you're expected to stay there as long as you and they want you to be in that position. And it's vetoable by either party with some of these shows. I've watched them and it seems like some of them can be good for law enforcement. They show what it's actually like to be a cop, what it's like on the streets. You sort of sympathize more with the officers. But I don't know, there's something about this that's rubbing a lot of people the wrong way. I think just since the Guthrie case is still unsolved and you see that, the leadership in the department was taking so much time with these producers before planning out this show. There's also questions like, were they getting access to public records more quickly than regular people could have? They were just sending body camera videos back and forth, that kind of thing. What's your general opinion of shows like this? It's a mixed bag, Brian. As you point out correctly, it gives people an idea what law enforcement is really like. And shows them that it's not like it seems to somebody who's just looking at what they see in the news. It is sometimes terrifying. It's always demanding. And to me, I see uniforms. The FBI has not done anything like this, and I learned more about uniformed police officers and what they have to do, so I think they're valuable there. I have always wondered how those things affect legal proceedings of the people who were arrested or detained or part of any kind of situation. I can't imagine a lawyer saying, hey, this is a good idea for the department. So yeah, it's a mixed bag, and I can tell you that the agents I spoke with during my career said that they wouldn't want to have anything to do with anything like that, because if something goes bad, God forbid something goes bad, you've done it on public record right then and there. Certainly now that there are body cams, that same thing still applies, but it's kind of like driving your car with a camera on you the whole time. It's great if not until something happens that you screwed up, and then you've really caused yourself some trouble. And just back to the head of homicide and cold case being moved out. I can't help but wonder if the people with more experience were still in those roles. If we would be in a different place now with the Nancy Guthrie investigation, we'd be in a different place. I can't say for sure that it would have been solved. I'll bet we would have been way farther down the road and possibly solved. It's one of those what-if type things. And I think the reason, by the way, that the involvement in the show bothers some people, is the reason that it kind of sticks. It sticks in the back of my mind. That there's all these feelings that the sheriff is out there for his own aggrandizement and for building up his department. And this kind of plays into that narrative, whether it's true or not. It plays into that narrative. Yeah. And again, when you see all the hundreds of emails and the time that it's taking the personnel in the sheriff's office to respond to these producers, you do just wonder, there's crime in Puma County. There's a lot of crime. Makes you wonder, like, shouldn't they be maybe focusing on that instead of like a reality show? Yeah. Yeah. I think there's positives and negatives to the show. To shows like that. And I think overall they've been a net positive. But in certain situations, they've been a significant negative in specific situations. Are you surprised that they were so interested in this reality show based on what we saw from the sheriff? I mean, he did a lot of interviews initially. There were the press conferences. He seemed to be a fan of being on TV. Yeah, yeah. It's very troubling when you see something like that, which indicates that the people at the top may be very much interested in media. And keep in mind, this is an elected official here. So any publicity like that would be just immensely helpful. It's also kind of, unsettling that he would be involved in that, and you get some people in law enforcement, and I suppose any other kind of situation where the media is paying attention to you, you get to like that. And when that happens, sometimes the primary responsibilities you have take a secondary role to getting your face on camera or getting positive reviews, something like that. It's disturbing when you see that. Again, these are just my impressions. I I'm but it's kind of leaving a bad taste. Well, more than kind of leaving a bad taste in my mouth. I think that there was somebody much more interested in doing things his way than the right way, and getting his face on camera instead of getting other people's face on mugshots. And you and I spoke last time about I had reported that the A hair has now been sent to the FBI lab. A hair that was already at the Florida lab that the Pima County Sheriff's Office uses has now been sent for additional testing, more comprehensive testing with the FBI. And since I spoke to you, the FBI actually put out a statement about it, which I thought was kind of interesting, trying to read between the lines of what they said. They said, we're still receiving your inquiries on this. This is not new evidence or information, which I knew. This isn't like a new hair they found. It's a hair that was found initially and is just now being sent to the FBI. It says FBI asked to test this DNA 2 months ago with the same technology we've always had when the local sheriff instead sent it to a private lab. Any further developments we will share as soon as appropriate. But the part where they said FBI asked to test this DNA 2 months ago, to me just showed maybe a little animosity that's still there between the FBI and the sheriff. Yeah, that statement was a little bit more than a little animosity. For the FBI to release a statement like that in any way, shape, or form criticize local partners is really not a great thing. And when they spoke or when they released that, they didn't even use the sheriff's name. And that is really kind of intentional as far as I can see, because if you know he's an elected official, he would like to see his name on these things. And so by not releasing his name, they're kind of indicating that they're at a distance, working relationship-wise. And I think maybe trying to make the point like, hey, we wanted this months ago. We had the same technology months ago. Again, kind of back to you. Wonder if they had the experienced people in charge of homicide. Would things have been different? I'm kind of wondering if they had sent the hair months ago when the FBI first asked for it, if things would have been different. I can't help but think so. See, when the sheriff is down into the weeds into a case so far that he's making the decisions on whether we're going to cooperate with the FBI or not on this one little hair. Imagine what else he might have his fingers on. They say, well, he couldn't really damage the investigation. He's just, a manager. Well, guess what? He's making specific, important decisions in the case. If I was a sheriff and my homicide, people refused to send evidence to the FBI lab, we'd have a conference and find out about that. We'd want to know exactly why they felt that the FBI's lab was not good enough for them. And I think it's indicative of an animus and a feeling of animosity between the sheriff and the FBI. And it's really unheard of. And it's unheard of for the FBI to say, hey, we asked. We wanted to do it the right way, But the sheriff, for reasons we don't know, needed to send it to a lab 3,000 miles away. Yeah, yeah, like I said, I think that there was definitely some animosity there. In the last couple of weeks, I've talked to people on both sides. You know, smart people, law enforcement experts, people like you. Some believe that. Smart people and people like me, and people like you. Yeah. Some people, but no, none of them have cute cats that pop up during the, you're the only one. I'm nervous again. Yeah. Which a lot of people liked, by the way. But you know, I'm glad some people think that there was only one suspect and that it's totally possible to have done this alone. And there are others who are 100% convinced that it was at least 2 people, maybe 3 or 4. Where do you stand on that? I think that your statement that you just made was absolutely all-encompassing and correct. Some people very, very rightly say that it's hard to imagine a single person doing this. But at the same time, you can't put your weight down on the ice. And I don't mean to be equivocal on this, but the finest, in my opinion, the finest investigative organization in the world is having trouble with this case. So I don't want to sit here on the internet and say I would have done this differently or I would have done I believe this and this and this. I think both are possible. I think it's more likely statistically that it was 2 people. But when you go back and you look at a lot of the famous kidnapping cases in history, occasionally they are and frequently they are sole individuals. But when they are sole individuals, usually